Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for our sixth panel discussion in our DSB Digital Plus program. This evening's theme is the integration of theory of knowledge in the IB diploma subjects. The fact that we have over 600 people registered at this event suggests to me that it's a subject that many of our colleagues are looking for perhaps more support and understanding in. During the talk, therefore, if you have any questions for our panelists, please put them into the question and answer session, question and answer box, and I will see if we can arrange for them to be answered at the end of the panel discussion. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists. Firstly, for those of you in Mumbai and many people beyond, Mona Servai, who requires no real introduction. She started her teaching career in 1995 at J.B. Pettit School and has been principal at both the Bombay International School, where she introduced the Cambridge and IB curricula, and Mount Litera School International, which is an IB continuum school here in Mumbai. She has also worked on rewriting state textbooks using concept-based instruction and training teachers to create concept-based classrooms in these traditional schools. In 2017-18, she was Director of Education of the Sir J.J. Schools, Mumbai, catering to first-generation learners. She holds an honorary position on the Academic Council of 321 Foundation, a teacher training organization. She is part of the Social Emotional Ethical Learning India and works with teachers and students from a diverse backgrounds to promote well-being in schools. She was a member of the Asia Pacific Heads Council from 2014 to 2016. She continues to work with the IBO as a consultant, workshop leader, and a school visit team leader. Equally esteemed is our colleague Frank Bradshaw, Head of School for Goldcrest International School in Navi Mumbai. He was the founding head and has been here since 2011. His international teaching career started in 1991, and he has been in IB schools since 1994, having worked in Syria, Finland, Germany, Vietnam, Azerbaijan, Brunei, Grand Cayman, Norway, and of course now in India. He's a native of the United States and holds a Bachelor's of Arts in History from Temple University, as well as a Master's of Education from Antioch University. He has taught IBDP Economics, History, Theory of Knowledge, and MYP Humanities, and has been in school administration for over 20 years. Frank is an IB visiting school team member, assisting schools in the IB authorization process, as well as a workshop leader running workshops for young teachers and school administrators. He also serves as chair for the IB Heads Association Western Division, covering Maharashtra and Gujarat, and he has been the vice president of the India IB Heads Association since 2019. Pooja Sudhir. Pooja is the current IBDP Extended Essay and Theory of Knowledge Coordinator at DSB International School in Mumbai. She has taught IGCSE and DP English in addition to TOK for many years. She recently concluded a TOK-based research project for the Council of British International Schools Middle Leadership Programme, which focused on using creative arts to develop critical thinking skills in grade 11 theory of knowledge students. She is also acting as a change facilitator for one of the Action Research Project groups for the Global Tipping Point Summit. Her contribution there is in the domain of differentiated teaching and learner's choice in the classroom. Amog Desai completed the ICSE examinations at St Mary's in 2014 and then joins DSB for the IB program as one of our first graduating cohort. After graduating in 2016, he pursued a law degree at the University of Warwick. He completed his degree this year and is now doing his legal practice course at the University of Bournemouth. And finally, our moderator, Shirin Pettit. Shirin is the head of primary here at DSB International School. She's originally from Canada. She has a history degree from McGill University and obtained her master's in educational leadership and management from the University of London. She has been a teacher at DSB for over 15 years and has taught most primary grades computing history and theory of knowledge. She is also a theory of knowledge examiner for the IB. As I said, if you have any questions whilst the panel discussion is taking place, please add them into the question and answer section of the Zoom panel. So now, with no further ado, can I please hand over to Shirin, and thank you very much to all our panelists for their contributions this evening.
Thank you very much, Howard. Very lovely, warm introduction to everyone. Welcome to all of our guests. There are a lot of areas to discuss today, so I'm just going to jump right in. The first question, I think, on everybody's mind is, why should TOK be integrated into all the DP subjects, given its relative weight in the final IB transcript? Will the integration of TOK into DP subjects actually help in establishing interdisciplinary connections in a program that is so compartmentalized in its 6 subject groups? Mona.
Thank you, Shireen. Thank you for that question. And I'm going to pick up on 2 words in that question before I even begin to answer it. One of it is weight, because weight is really indeed relative. And the other word I'm going to pick up is the word compartmentalized. So let's just step back and look at the mission statement of the IB, right? We want students to be knowledgeable, inquiring, caring, and compassionate. And so there is a strong emphasis on intercultural understanding, open-mindedness, and attitudes to respect and evaluate a range of points of view. Now, what is the glue in the IB that does that? It's the core, it's the TOK. And it's really not just about the points, but it is a transformation in thinking and developing critical skills to meet the uncertainty of future demands. And subject teachers may not always have the time to raise broad inquiry questions, but what makes the DP course different in the subjects from an HSC course? It's because we want these subjects also to be taught through inquiry. So how does TOK help over here? If you look at the subject aims and the TOK aims, they just apply across all the subjects. Don't think of them as subjects, think of them as disciplines. For example, how is knowledge constructed in a particular subject? How do we get a balance between invention and discovery of any kind of knowledge in your subject? And once knowledge is constructed, how, when, and why does it evolve? What is the historical perspective? Does it undergo a paradigm shift? How do you come up with new horizons in subjects? What is the role of certain individuals, certain very strong individuals who have shaped the way thinking is taken in a subject? Imagine if there had never been an Einstein, what would the world look like today? And then, of course, on a day-to-day basis, we look at what constitutes methods and extensions and explanations. Do you teach history in a particular way? Do you teach science in the same way? What are assumptions that you make for subject teachers make? And what are some sources of error? And looking across all of this, Frank, wouldn't you agree that every subject has standards, right? And have these standards changed? Are they culture specific? What are the concepts? Maybe you can shed some light on this?
Well, when you look at the International Baccalaureate, the first thing you have to realize is one of the things that makes the IB so different from other boards is TOK, actually. It is very distinct. I mean, it was added to the IB, I think, the 3rd or 4th year of the IB. It goes right back to Gus Hans's ideas. And I think the point you have to make is to create an IB environment. To do that, you have to consider the profile of an IB teacher. An IB teacher is a teacher that doesn't pour knowledge in someone's head. An IB teacher leads a student on their own individual journey of education, of enlightenment in that sense. Now, this is very philosophical, I realize, but an IB teacher has to be able to understand that subjects have specific skills, and subjects are also subject to revision. Now, I'm an historian, And one thing that you realize in history is while the skills always remain the same, our interpretations may change because of society. This itself puts inherent bias and things like that. A teacher who teaches history should be aware of that. To escape or try to escape from being a TOK teacher and just teach your subject is really to really hijack the IB program. It is meant for integration. It is meant to be explored. It is not meant to be content. You can't approach the International Baccalaureate like you would other boards in which you're simply covering portions and ticking off boxes. You can do that, but what you're not delivering is the International Baccalaureate. And that TOK, which will instill in students that ability to reason and interpret and to look at knowledge from different points of understanding. This will serve the student, not just in university, it really will serve them in the future. But as a teacher, you should be walking this walk. It isn't just something you talk, you should be walking the walk. I think it's very difficult for a teacher to escape TOK in their class. Bringing TOK in your class specifically enhances your class, enhances its effectiveness, and it helps students make those connections. You see, students make the connections themselves. They go to French class, they go to physics class, they go to economics class. They are holistically looking at the IB experience. But we as teachers sometimes only see it. I'm a physics teacher, I'm a math teacher, I see that side of the spectrum. The student sees all the colors of the spectrum. That TOK was created to help the student put some pattern or put some understanding to that. But we as teachers have to realize we're a part of the very same process. And we ourselves are going through a TOK journey. I know when I work with my TOK coordinator and she brings me into a class, it's a journey for me, for myself. And I've been doing IB for many, many, many years. It's a journey for myself. I am continuously coming up with new ideas about subjects, about how people understand information because of my exposure to what happens in TOK classes. So anything you can add, Mona?
No, I think very well said, because really not looking at it through the narrow telescopic lens and just seeing one perspective, and then just broadening it so that then you get multiple perspectives, and then you're a true IB teacher for true IB students. And it's transformation of thinking. It's not about the grades. It's not about those points. And believe you me, even those 3 points of the core can really make a difference to that 40.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's not just the weightage, it's what it does. Thank you, Frank. That was marvelous.
So following up from that, if we are successfully integrating through the subject we might teach, how can we help from the student perspective so that they can understand the relevance of the TOK course that they're undertaking? Frank, do you want to follow up with that?
Well, I think we're talking about sort of an integration. Let's look at it from an IB point of view. Collaboration is at the hallmark of an IB school. It's there in the standards and practices. I know when I visit schools and I meet with teachers, one of the first questions they all ask me is, well, how can we do collaboration because we're an IB diploma school? Well, my answer is, how could you not do collaboration because you're an IB diploma school? And the TOK allows that to happen. It's also very important to realize that sometimes you can learn from your students. It is often a good idea to get TOK discussion started in your class through your students. There's nothing wrong with a teacher asking their students, okay, guys, have you picked up anything in your TOK class that relates to this? We're talking about bias or point of view, right? Or we're doing economics and we're looking at how people from the left or people from the right will interpret an economic theory in different ways. Why is that happening? If you learn something in TOK that might be able to explain that, and they may come up with answers, they will come up with responses.
Yeah.
So it is very important to realize that, and the collaboration between the teachers and between the students is important. It's also important for teachers to realize that they need to collaborate with their TOK coordinators and their TOK staff. Teachers in their classroom can use TOK theories. They're not teaching the TOK class in their physics class. So they're not concerned with how to write the essay or how to do the exhibition. but they're dealing with the knowledge questions, the perceptions of knowledge, and even the concept links sometimes specifically. They're dealing with that. And so it becomes very important for a successful International Baccalaureate Diploma teacher to have a sounding of TOK theory. That's what it's there for. It's a theory of knowledge. That's what it is, a theory of knowledge to help us understand how we understand. Mona, what would you say? What would be your feelings on that?
I completely agree with you. And I love the way you brought in the concepts that you can bring, because now with the way TOK is taught, I see a question in the Q&A talking about how to motivate the children. And I think the only way that you can motivate your students, if you are motivated yourself, I mean, if you bring that excitement. So imagine somebody walking out of a TOK class, having talked about justification of evidence, and you go to your subject class, you go to a biology class or an economic class, you're still buzzing with justification of evidence. How would the teacher pick up on it? And for this, I can give an example from my previous school, because the math teacher had 6 higher level AA math students, and the students were just so excited. So they had just one goal, because they were doing higher level math, and they were like, how can we change the perception of math across the school? Because everybody thinks math is something that needs to be feared. Oh my God, you're doing higher level math. You must be some kind of a whiz. And so what they did was they spoke to the math teacher and they said, how can we bring TOK and infuse it? And it was just fabulous, because she worked with them and they had an entire math week. And in the week, they gave puzzles, they did artwork, they had memes, they had all kinds of things happening. And then they had a TOK assembly where they talked about math, you know, whether you have fear or not. So with all of that, just with that example, it was a teacher who was so passionate about the math, but who also saw that TOK can bring in a much broader perspective into the narrowness of the worksheet or the AA or the, you know, the demands that the curriculum has. And look at what it did. It was just really wonderful. So I think that speaks for itself, wouldn't you say?
Thank you, Mona. Amol, do you want to add something from the student perspective about how to make TOK engaging for the students?
I honestly think that TOK is very well integrated into every subject, and that in itself makes every subject that we study at the IB even more interesting than it already is. In English, for example, if you're studying a poem or a piece of literature, it's not just textual analysis that's important. It's like you have to go beyond that. What was the author's personal plight at that time? What was the social cultural context in which it was written? What was the world like at that time? You're going beyond the text and looking at the background in which it was written. In history, for example, you know, there are a lot of perspectives in history, as Frank rightly mentioned, and that honestly affects what pieces of research that were written. It's like you have to look beyond what was written in order to gain a fuller understanding. What was the writer's what was his political affiliation at that time? Is there confirmation bias? Has he left out important points just to support his own conclusions? All that is already integrated into various subjects in the IB, because the IB, as Mona and Frank have said, has such a holistic approach that you want to go beyond the content and have a fuller holistic perspective.
Thank you. What about bringing it further down the school? Many of us work in schools that offer only the DP. So for the students encountering TOK in grade 11 is the first time they've had to think this way. How would a teacher in a middle school or pre-DP help build preparedness for TOK in the students? Help them build the skills that they need? Mona?
Oh, I think we're all doing it in our own ways. And think about it, TOK is 100 hours in the DP, but it's almost impossible to do it in 100 hours, right? There's so much. I can see Pooja smiling, and I know that Pooja has some ideas also on how to bring it down. So there's so much that you can do that actually so many of us in various schools, it just goes by different names, whether you call it a bridge IB, a pre-IB, or you call it core skills, or you call it explorations and perspectives. So what we really want to do is bring these skills to the younger classes. We usually work with 9th and 10th, but Shireen, you raised an important point. How about, 6th, 7th, 8th also getting the skills that are required? And they aren't rocket science skills. I mean, like how do you use reasoning? What role does language play? And, what happens in the media? Perspectives, bias, what is ethical reasoning, what does this mean, and all these kinds of things. So we can develop a course. Pooja, do you want to add? Because I think you had some interesting thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think, my primary motivation to do my research project related to TOK was this, to change the perception of TOK among students to begin with, I think the key is, two things, two buzzwords to remember. One is to make it personal and to keep it simple, okay? Especially when you're doing it at the pre-IB level, because, the students at that point are not going to be able to look at the big DP picture. They're not going to look at the pre-university course and what they will gain out of it in a long term, and they don't have to. But if you can connect it with their lives, if you can personalize it any which way, then I think it makes a world of a difference. And I mean when I say keeping it simple, because you don't have to kind of cover breadth and depth at grade 9 and 10, and I think that's the beauty of it. Like, just let me give you an example. For instance, currently I'm doing a pre-IB course at my school, and what I have done is, again, Mona, what you were referring to, or what Frank said about linking concepts, right? Now, what the IB has done very beautifully and progressively with the new syllabus is reduce the course, if it was even possible, to have 12 core concepts, right? So what I have done is taken these 12 concepts, and I started with saying, okay, I will going to create 12 units and I'm going to teach them and run with it. And I was all excited. And I said, no, hang on, let's cut it down. Let's keep it simple. So I kind of fused them into pairs. So now I have only 6 pairs. I only have 6 very short units. And I am, introducing this to the pre-IB students, but I thought that this could be done with grade 9 and 10 beautifully, because it's low-key. It's not going to be too much effort on either part. But the beauty is that, you will get them to engage with the concepts that you just mentioned. So for instance, my first unit was an evidence and explanation, and I got them to solve all kinds of murder mysteries, hypothetical, of course. But when they were done, doing these mock interrogation rooms, and when they were, done role-playing the detectives and suspects and everything, and I said, well, that's just exciting and this is good. Now, can we take evidence and explanation and go to a science classrooms, right? Let's do that, So then I introduced and, just got them to revisit, claim, evidence, and reasoning, which is the building blocks in the science classroom. And I said, okay, can you kind of, get 1 week, see what's happening in your science classrooms, come back with one example of claim, evidence, and reasoning. And then let's explore or revisit the connection between explanation and evidence through that. And I think this is something that I had done even with my IB students earlier, which is to give them a little notebook, a very, very little notepad, and tell them, you know what, like every week you will come into the TOK class with at least 1 TOK connection from any other subject that you're studying in the DP, just 1, okay, 1 per week. That's all I want you to do. And I haven't done this, but it can be so simply done. I want to emphasize that it's very, very simple. It can be so simply done when you choose a particular question, let's say a knowledge question or even a concept, and put it in the news bulletin for the week for all the teachers and say that this is a question that, this is a TOK question for this week, right? Try to link it in your subject. Don't make a conscious choice. If you're preparing, if you're discussing, if this comes in, just rope it in and run with it. Just do that. It's simple things like that can start things ticking. And very soon, the beauty of introducing this earlier is that TOK is not a subject, it's not a theory, it's not syllabus, it's not anything, but it's simply a culture of thinking. And how beautiful would it be for any school, be it BP or otherwise, to just create a culture of thinking, So I don't see why any other school should also not pick up these units and run with them. So yeah, that would be my 2 penny bit on how to make it relevant for students.
Yeah, I love that culture of thinking, because I see a question over here about whether TOK is a philosophical perspective. It's actually not a philosoph. I mean, it draws on some epistemology, but it is a practical application. And if you talk about what are the skills, they're really the critical thinking skills, how to reason well, the role that language plays, how to spot a fallacy, some, media literacy, look at perspectives and bias. These are all critical thinking skills. And, it's just, but the only thing is, Pooja, I don't know, but in the younger classes, maybe there should be some kind of an outcome, even if it is a small outcome, so that we're able to then measure and see how that impacts them coming into the IB.
Yeah, and I think a mini exhibition of sorts could definitely be spin on, maybe.
Right?
Can I
Yes,
add
right.
something?
Yeah.
I'm going to take this very philosophically, really very philosophically. First, I think we have to look at the world we're living in. We're coming into a future that is forever developing. So the concept that knowledge is static is no longer relevant in the 21st century. So a curriculum of static knowledge is no longer relevant for preparing students for the future. Realistically speaking, if we're teaching students things in computer science or physics now, those things may be overturned in 20 years or 15 years. This is the importance of having a skill-based education, because with skills, the students can develop as those disciplines develop in the 21st century. Bringing TOK theories outside of IB and bringing them into primary or middle school or grade 9 and 10 should be the work of any good teacher. It's good practice. I mean, you can make a TOK class. You can talk to a group of 7th graders about a football match, and that could easily be turned into a TOK class. Okay, look at a Liverpool game and look at how fans from Liverpool or fans from London will write about, how newspapers will write about the very same game at times, and you will sometimes see the same kind of point of view of bias that anyone would have in history. And also, one of the benefits you can have when you teach middle school is you can teach theme-based and concept-based programming. I've been fortunate to work in schools in which we could create our own curriculum, specifically in grades 6, 7, and 8. And when you can put together your own theme-based system, you are actually delivering a TOK program to these students, because that's exactly what's happening. They're starting to see the patterns of knowledge. When they start to see the patterns of knowledge, because it's theme-based, then they're on the road to becoming TOK students. So we have so much freedom, especially with primary school up to grade 8 specifically. We have so many opportunities to bring an inquiry into our classroom, to allow student voice to be heard in the classroom, to focus on the development of specifically of skills and themes and concepts, that these will lay the foundation for TOK. That's ideas I have. Mona, do you have anything you'd like to add to that or at all?
No, very, very perfectly said. We have such opportunities. We should use them so that, we're really preparing our kids to be thinkers and to deal with uncertainties and not just, content. Really well said. Thank you, Pooja, Frank, Shireen, Ramo.
Frank, actually, there's a question in the chat that I would like to give you as a follow-up to that about if you are inadvertently teaching TOK in your subject, do you need to make it explicit? Is that important to the student experience?
No, because what you're doing, I'm going to do TOK now. You're doing what you shouldn't do. Okay. What you can do is put that in your course, have those discussions, and then if you like, afterwards, you can say, guys, this actually was a TOK lesson. You understand? TOK has to be integrated in teaching and learning, and it has to be integrated in how the student works and the teacher teaches. So by saying, okay, now we're going to stop the history lesson and have TOK, don't do that. Don't do that. but it might be a good idea to point it out after a very successful lesson or a successful assessment or something. And you can say, you know what, guys, actually, I got this idea from TOK. You understand? Then the student might start to see that benefit there. But I wouldn't specifically say, okay, you may want to put in your lesson plan, that's for yourself. But I wouldn't be something, okay, on Thursday, we're going to have a TOK physics lesson. I'm not necessarily sure that's the best way to go. It should be integrated. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Amol, as somebody who came straight out of ICSE into the IBDP, do you have any reflections on that experience, moving into a critical thinking paradigm when you didn't really have any experience of that prior?
It's a little bit shocking, I must admit. I mean, at the very, I had to completely restructure my entire way of thinking, which was not easy to do. Honestly, I think the most shocking thing was that grade 8, grade 9, even grade 10 students had better critical thinking skills than I did. That was not a nice feeling. But I think at the same time, like having to restructure your way of thinking, it's kind of like a clean slate, it's like you're not building on anything, you're starting fresh. And I think that the fact that the IB had TOK as a specific subject helped, because it gave me the skills that was necessary, like not for independent thinking, not only for life outside school, but also for the different subjects that I would be studying in the IB. I think, especially for English, history, probably even environmental sciences and biology, in terms of how to conduct research, how to analyze research, how to tackle a problem. It was first of all a refreshing approach, but I think without TOK, I don't think I would come across what the IB was aiming to do. And I think, as Frank said, that there's so much freedom with what you can do with students up to possibly grade 8, grade 9, in terms of how to set them on the path, themes of knowledge, how to develop skills. I think that's very, very important. It's never nice to like come into grade 11 and be like, yeah, you know what, I'm not completely sure what I'm doing. So if they're set on the path prior to the IB and prior to like actually having to study TOK, it will be extremely beneficial, because I think it will make the IB and TOK a lot more enjoyable, and it'll be a far more fruitful and enjoyable experience for them.
Great. Thank you very much. Given that subject teachers do tend to feel siloed by their content in the experience of the DP, would it be more practical or purposeful to include subject teachers more in the TOK assessment, in the exhibition, in the essay writing? Would that make any sense? Mona?
Yes, it would, but I always think how lovely to be a subject teacher where you can bring out the TOK links without having to do the assessment. Sometimes I think TOK teachers who are listening will probably agree that the assessment does sometimes try to kill the joy of the TOK classroom. But having said that, the IB's also tried very hard, and we have a new syllabus from last year onwards, 2021 or 2020, 2021 onwards. And yeah, I think it would be great, but I do believe that we need to bring in subject teachers, not just for assessment, but for assessment as well as for teaching, and also for integration. So what do I mean by these three things, right? So let's say TOK teachers are trained in a particular subject. So for example, I'm trained in the sciences, but I have a natural interest, say, in the arts or literature, but I may be struggling with history, I may be struggling with some of the human sciences. How wonderful it would be to truly integrate so that I could pull in a subject teacher, not just there like as an add-on, but if we could co-plan and co-create a classroom. That's really the beauty of collaboration, where you're co-creating together, you're co-creating the integration, the content, the inquiry, putting it all together. So that's one level. The other level, of course, would be that with the assessment, we need subject teachers. Boy, I mean, you have no idea how much we need them, because, you know, students come up with examples, particularly in the essay, and we're like, what does this mean? I mean, I don't know what this means in physics, and how does anybody and is this for real? Are they really trying to do that? So, you know, having deconstructing essay titles, you always get a different perspective. You kind of tend to get jaded if you're looking at it just from the lens of a TOK knowledge question perspective. So that's the other level in which we can have subject teachers. And the third level, of course, is we're there for you. So if you are teaching your subject and you want some authentic TOK links to come in, well, shout out, you know, maybe there's something in your aims, or there's some knowledge question, or there's something, and we could co-collaborate and do this together in your class. So it's like 3 levels of integration. And I think it would just be practical to include DP subject teachers all the way, and not just for assessment or just for a small point. Yeah,
Yeah, I would just like to take on from that, because there are pros and cons, and one must kind of weigh them out before one makes a choice. Especially schools with very huge number of students, I think to include subject teachers both in teaching as well as in assessment is fantastic. Secondly, as Mona said, you could have multiple perspectives and ideas, you know, just burgeoning by the mere presence of another mind, you know. But there is, again, sorry, this is the TOK examiner speaking probably, but there is a danger, and one must be wary of it, which is a lot of, especially now, the assessment in TOK is in a written format of communication, and everything that is written also requires structure. And to drill the skill of structured writing is as important as the critical thinking skills. And sometimes to have too many cooks, you know, while, you know, facilitating students to develop that structuring skill could be very, very problematic. So one has to be a little wary, and probably you know, just work a model which kind of makes sure that the student gets one instruction as far as the structuring is concerned. But that's a minor thing which can be easily overcome. But I would just like to again propose a 3-point model, so to speak. And this is again thanks to the science teachers in my school who were open enough to actually enter the TOK classroom with me. So it's a very simple model that I have developed, which is to start, like Mona said, to start with their pet unit. So I went up to Dr. Howard, who's a biology teacher. I went up to Mr. Vipul, who is the Vipul Mehra, who is the physics teacher, Mr. Bivas Chakravorty, who is the chemistry teacher. I just went up and I said, which is your favorite unit from whatever you teach in the DP? You know, what is it that you like the most? And, you know, they all had their thing. You know, somebody had relativity, somebody had genetics, and, you know, Mr. Bavash was very interested in chemical compounds and etc. So I said, okay, great. So what I did is I went back and I tried to access their subject textbook and read a little bit from that particular unit myself. And then I went back and I said, okay, with some IA prompts, okay, 2-3 of them. And I said, do you want to take a pick from here? Okay, something that you think could, you know, channel discussion using genetics or using inertial frames of reference and theory of relativity, etc. And sure enough, they were able to, right? And then the third thing was, once they were, you know, done doing that discussion using their subject knowledge, etc., then I got students and then I took the reins in my hand a little bit more, okay, where I said, okay, now you have to answer, you have discussed this question in the light of chemistry, in the light of biology, but now can you think of an object through which you can answer this? And pick that object from the chemistry lab, pick that object from one of the science lessons that you have done from the science textbook for all I care. But try to now kind of, you know, make a little bit of effort to connect it with assessment. So it really was that simple to keep following this 3-pronged method with each and every, science teacher that I collaborated with. And again, I would like to emphasize the starting point was again to personalize and to make it simple for the subject teacher. So I started with, what do you enjoy teaching the most? And I think it was fantastic to see in a chemistry collaboration that we started with discussing Breaking Bad, and we looked at, chemical compounds and the unit on that. And then we had an IA prompt, which is, should a certain kind of knowledge be refrained from being pursued because on ethical grounds, something as simple as that. But you kind of give a focus, which is simple, personalize it for the subject teachers. And yes, as all those who are TOK teachers, TOK coordinators in the audience do take the lead, you may not see it, but it is so worth it to put that effort to make the to take the first step, and then everything else just falls into place. And it's very rewarding, it's very enriching. So just take the first step and invite someone in, and same for the subject teachers as well. Just invite any TOK teacher in, just welcome them in.
Thank you, Pooja. I remember inviting the math teacher into my TOK class, but I left very frightened. I'd learned something about math that I hadn't known before, changed everything. All right, so it has been mentioned that the TOK framework has just changed. How do you feel that it supports subject integration better than the previous framework was a bit heavy? Mona, any thoughts?
I'm not sure about better or not, but I can just talk about the new syllabus and the framework that we've been following. And I look back to the first thing that I talked about, which is the IB mission statement. And we want to, include international mindedness in all the subjects and across the DP. So international mindedness is really acting, with an openness to the world and looking at how we're interconnected to others. And so with that, TOK is central to international mindedness. And for this, the new syllabus has got this wonderful thing called the core theme. And in the core theme, it links to the learner profile and international mindedness so well, because you talk about, questions like, where do my values come from? What shapes my perspective as a knower? How do I distinguish between something that is contestable and non-contestable? So you get a diversity and richness of different perspectives, and you look at the influence of, knowledge and cultures. So with the new syllabus, you have the core theme, and then you have to choose 2 out of different optional themes. So for example, you have knowledge and language. So what is the role of metaphors, or what are the rules and conventions? Like Pooja mentioned, chemical compounds, what does the language and what do the symbols look like in chemistry versus math? We can look at knowledge and technology, which is again so relevant in the world that we live in today, because how are virtual communities different or the same from the communities that we have been used to interacting with? And then, of course, you have knowledge and indigenous societies, and you have knowledge and religion, which bring in different perspectives, talk about power, and so on and so forth. So that's really one way of integrating much more easily, because what the themes do is the themes are like a lens to the real world. And these themes can be applicable. You can talk about politics in science, politics in history, politics in the visual arts, and so on and so forth, technology, and so on. So that's one way. The other thing that the new syllabus has done is that the 5 areas of knowledge are linked to the 6 subject groups. So we no longer have to talk about theories of ethics, for example. I mean, we don't have that as an area of knowledge which used to always boggle us down. So you have the arts, history, math, human sciences, and natural sciences. And they're all subjects that students are already familiar with in the younger classes before they come to the IB. And how do we look at each of these? We look at them through the framework. And so the framework also brings in the broad questions that every subject teacher should be asking, I mean, scope, what is my subject about? What is physics about? What is geography about? What is natural, what is chemistry all about? And how is it different? So what are the methods and tools? Does a historian use the same kind of tools that a scientist does? Or what are the tools in the arts? And then bringing about perspectives, which even in the natural sciences, you may have two different theories. So if you have different theories, you're looking at perspectives. How do you validate? Which one are you going to look at? And of course, the fourth aspect, which is so, so important in the world that we live in today, is ethics. I mean, how do we do the right thing for the greatest common good? So I really think that this new framework is so simplified, and the entire syllabus is, just sort of brought out, and it's so clear. And even the subject guide is much thinner, as you said, the last syllabus was much more wordy. When I pulled it out, I thought, oh, is this really the subject guide? Have I picked up something else? But it's like Pooja said, no, make it simple, make it personal so that it's relevant. And as Frank said, every teacher is a TOK teacher, like every teacher is a language teacher. So we should have that mantra for the DP.
But also looking at a couple of questions, etc. But to add to the whole theme, the core theme is just fantastic. So even if schools do not have the bridge course for the TOK, etc., the core theme can actually work as your bridge course or introduction course. So even the concept-based units that I had earlier mentioned are something that you can use and run with it, in your core theme, and that's what you begin with, right? It will give you and the students such a firm footing and grounding that even if they come from like a MOOC did from ICSE and other national curriculum, I think it's a fantastic gateway to start to think in a different fashion. And the whole personal thing, I mean, I can't emphasize enough, because again, to just give you an example, because I did this with with the batch that was still doing the old course, so they didn't have any exhibition to do, but I really needed a buy-in with these students because they were anti-TOK. They were just like, whatever, you can do it in your ivory tower, but it has got nothing to do with us. So I asked them a very simple question. I didn't even go and ask them to look at the media. I said, you look into your own life and choose just one, simply one event that has completely changed or metamorphosed or something that is memorable in your life. Okay, pick that event. And I sat down with them, and they just shared that particular moment of their life with me. And through that, I kind of, got them to locate what was perspective or what was interpretation or what was knowledge. And from there, it just kind of ran, because I said, now you can construct a knowledge question around it, because at that time we still had to do that, holy Lord. God knows how we got that going. And after that, they had a little exhibition of their own inside the classroom, where they were just talking about this very, very personal experience and memory, and connecting it with, it was again an audiovisual medium. I said, you pick up an audiovisual medium and, do that. And it was fantastic, because it was almost like hypothetically, virtually walking through a museum with art installations and video installations. And it was very simple. And again, because I personalized it, and they, again, going back to what Frank was saying, you don't have to make TOK explicit. Even in the TOK class, it wasn't made explicit. They were just doing something that they felt was just simple and organic, and it works.
Thank you, Pooja. Frank, would you like to bring in anything to that?
Well, a lot has been said, so I'll make a few basic points. The first is I tend to look at the big picture of everything, because I am an historian. I think we have to look at the world we live in today, and if there's ever been a need for the IB or for TOK, it is now. We live in a world of such incredible misinformation, and the transfer of that misinformation through social media, through governments, the twisting of information, that the need to be able to look at knowledge and to look at bias and to be able to look in an open and a balanced way has never been more important since at least the 1930s as we are now, because we are entering into an age that is very reminiscent of where the world was going to in the 1930s. So it is a concern that I do have. Now we look at the new IB curriculum. and the TOK curriculum. And one of the great things, I mean, you look at the core patterns, right? You know, patterns are very important because we humans understand everything through patterns. And you look at the, you know, when you look at the knowledge and the learner, and you look at those 5 areas, they are very, very important because the scope and the perspective, et cetera. And as Mona has said, ethics, very important. Our ability to look at how we understand knowledge through all of them is extremely important. And they can be brought into any class because in every single subject, we are dealing with understanding of knowledge. And these can become very, very important. It may be very different for a math teacher or an English teacher to look at how scope or perspectives work in knowledge, but it's also, you know, very important. And I think even more so is these optional themes. Now, the optional themes, you only pick 2, right? But the optional themes, especially things like knowledge and technology, is actually an extremely meaningful and an important theme to look at. And honestly, it points to one of the big careers that's going to be a career of the 21st century. Okay, integrating knowledge with technology and how technology can affect knowledge, and knowledge should affect proper technology, meaning basically there will be I actually read something about this in the New York Times today, that a future career is actually going to be people that are going to validate knowledge and be able to see how technology spreading fake news from the truth, or even how technology could be used to hamper human development or hamper democracy. And these are very broad pattern questions, I realize that. But the IB, the new curriculum, is actually addressing these things. And I think they make them very valid. And they're valid. I mean, how do we know the scope of knowledge becomes very important when we understand knowledge in any single subject area? It's relevant for every subject area. Okay. And I'm just repeating myself now, so I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Frank. We are slowly coming to the end of our hour, and we have one last question here, which is around, it's a more practical example for a lot of people, and I hope that it'll go a long way to answering a lot of the other questions that people have posed in the Q&A box that we haven't had a chance to get to. So looking very practically at the idea of a team teaching model, how far does that go to support subject integration with TOK? And this is when you are actually timetabled TOK lessons as a subject teacher, and you work much more closely with the TOK teachers, which I think people will find an interesting example if they haven't had any experience of this. Pooja, would you like to just sketch out how this could work?
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of, and I've been to, you know, I've worked at various schools, so I've seen different models and I've seen the pitfalls and the pros and cons and everything. I think a lot of schools that do the whole team teaching model, you know, it is nice. It is a good effort. And I've seen like they will deliberately pair, like Mona, you were saying, you know, people from different disciplines and academia together and say, all right, you know, you can be the lead TOK teacher and then you can have another subject expert. So there is obviously a variety. But I think for that to be truly effective and to be truly seamless, it has to kind of start from somewhere, you know, to kind of have this whole team teaching where 20 teachers are teaching TOK simultaneously. It looks fantastic on paper and physically when you view TOK being, you know, taught like this with so many voices and multiplicity and diversity. But it truly is the last step. Like I think for especially for schools who are probably not doing this, you know, this model yet, to start small. To start with individual teachers. You know, a TOK coordinator, a TOK teacher works with one individual teacher at a time, and that's it, you know. So even if you say that in a span of one academic year, you have collaborated with 4 or 6 individual subject teachers, that's it. Even if it looks in that one academic year like a flash in the pan, like an artificial embedding of things, doesn't matter. Then there has to be a phase 2. Once you have generated interest and sparks, which I saw, you know, in the science teachers when they were in my class, for instance, then you can target the department. So then you have, you know, where the heads of department could get involved into integrating some TOK links within their department. So you have then kind of progressed to stage 2. And I think then it would be, viable to have this stage 3, where you have more teachers, and also those two phases will give you a clear sense of who is interested, who is self-motivated, and also they get the time, the subject teachers get the time, a scope to figure out how to, work with the nuts and bolts of it. Because otherwise, just kind of getting them physically inside the classroom does not work, because it just is going to move in way too many different directions. So, I mean, that would be my take on it personally. I know Mona and Frank, probably you have very different experiences.
No, I mean, I think you've laid it out really well, because let's not forget one thing. TOK is not just a warm and fuzzy feel-good subject, right? There is a well laid out syllabus. In fact, I just listening to you talk, I was remembering Eileen Dombrowski, who taught TOK for several years in UWC in Victoria, Canada. And she actually talked about perspectives on a curious subject. She's written this position paper. And in that, she talks about the skills that it takes to be a TOK teacher. So she put it very beautifully, because she said it's like you have the view from the top, but you have your feet on the ground. So while you're looking at all these multiple things through themes and knowledge questions and AOKs, there is syllabus, there is ground that you have to cover. So, just feeling that this is warm and fuzzy and anybody can teach TOK. And, I've been team teaching TOK with another colleague for the last 11 years. And we know just how much it takes the mickey out of us, the amount of preparation time, the number of things that you read, the amount of resources. And every year when we think like, oh, we've cracked it, so next year, why are we going to do this? You suddenly find, oh, this is an interesting resource. Well, how can we change this? How can we bring it? And that's what makes it really rich. And I saw a lovely comment on the chat, and it said that how about having 1 week in the, one period in the timetable each week for all subject teachers to have TOK discussions. I think that is brilliant. And if any school can do this, I know we used to have a lot of PD TOK discussions. It certainly didn't happen once a week, but I think just the way you slowly come into it, and you have to really be committed. You have to be committed to a breadth, but you also have to be committed to a certain amount of depth, because otherwise you're just like skimming. So I always think of the view from the top, but the feet on the ground. And, God bless Eileen Dombrowski, who just gave us such wonderful tools in order to teach it. So yeah, I agree. And we need the subject teachers, because the subject teachers go micro, they bring in the disciplinary depth, and then TOK goes macro, like Frank said, brings in the big picture. And then I suppose we'll all send our DP kids out into the world as truly transformed, international-minded global citizens. How's that?
That would be wonderful. As a parent of 2 IBDP graduates, I like to think that that's what has been done. We'll have to see. Frank, is there anything that you want to add to what Mona and Pooja were saying?
Pooja has actually hit the nail on the head. You do want all the teachers involved in TOK, but the thought of all the teachers team teaching it instantly is a foolish. I've tried it a few times in schools, and every single time I've tried it, it has crash landed. Okay, even with the best teachers doing it, it really doesn't. You have to get a core, and you should bring teachers into it. Maybe to do a guest talk or something like that, or for students to speak with teachers. I think the idea of having a TOK talk built in the timetable with the teachers once a month or twice a month would actually be a brilliant idea. It's one of the best ideas I've heard in a long time. But you want teachers involved in TOK, but you really need a core that actually run the class. And other teachers should be there as necessary, or occasionally as observers or supporters of the students. But, it's great if you can build a team of 10 TOK teachers, but that would take time and a lot of investment and a staff that stays stable in one school. You know, when I remember when I was in Norway, I mean, you'd have teachers who all worked in the same school for 30 years. So they were, there was a TOK, they've all been teaching TOK for 23 years, the whole team of them together for 23 years, you know. So yes, it worked there, you know, but I think Pooja's plan is ideal. And okay, right, thanks.
Lovely. Thank you very much. We are going to conclude at this point. Howard?
Yes, so I would just like to thank, first of all of the attendees. Thank you very much for joining us, for giving of your valuable time to listen and share. This will be posted, the recording of this will be posted on our website in a few days / weeks when that happens. Thank you for contributing your questions. I would like to really thank our panelists, Amog, Frank, Mona, Pooja, and of course Shirin for the moderation. It's been a really, really interesting conversation, and I think really nice that we've got such a strong theme of the big picture of why we learn TOK and what the humble subject teacher can contribute to the whole process. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you very much to our attendees who definitely came from all over India and I believe as far as West Yorkshire and possibly further. So thank you very much to everybody. Good night.
Thank you.